Welcome to TrampWorld. In 1975 something remarkable happened inside Kodak's research labs. An engineer created the world's very first digital camera, a device that had the power to change photography forever. It was not just a small step forward, it was a revolution waiting to unfold, a glimpse of the future arriving decades too early. Yet instead of celebrating it and investing in its growth, Kodak chose to set it aside, suppressing its own creation out of fear. They were afraid that this new technology would destroy their existing film business, the very foundation of their identity and success. So the invention that could have kept them at the center of innovation was hidden in the shadows. Their choice was not about lack of vision but about fear of loss, and that decision would become one of the greatest missed opportunities in corporate history. Their decision was rooted in protecting film sales rather than embracing innovation, because Kodak at that time was not just a company selling products, it was a cultural giant built on film rolls and printed photographs. Their entire identity revolved around the magic of capturing memories on celluloid, and they feared that digital technology would erase everything they had built. Instead of seeing digital photography as an extension of their legacy, they saw it as a threat to their dominance. The leadership clung tightly to what was familiar and profitable, choosing short-term security over long-term vision. What they didn't realize was that by refusing to adapt, they were slowly writing the first lines of their own downfall. The fear of losing film sales blinded them to the greater opportunity of redefining photography for the next generation, and in protecting their present they sacrificed their future. The story is not just business failure, it's a human story of fear versus courage, because at its core Kodak's choice mirrors the struggles we all face when confronted with change. On one side there is the comfort of the known, the familiar routines, the systems that have worked for years, and on the other side there is the unknown, a future filled with uncertainty, risk and possibility. Kodak's leaders were not villains, they were human beings afraid of letting go of what felt safe. Their fear of disruption kept them from embracing courage, and that hesitation turned into loss. This is the same tension many of us feel in our own lives when an opportunity arrives that asks us to step outside the boundaries we have built around ourselves. The Kodak story reminds us that courage is not about having all the answers but about being willing to trust the path we cannot fully see. And when fear wins over courage, the cost is not just missed success but missed growth, transformation and connection. Comfort zones can feel safe but often lead to missed opportunities because they give us the illusion of security while quietly keeping us from moving forward. Kodak stayed in its comfort zone, convinced that film would always dominate photography and that their current success would last forever. Yet by staying in that familiar space they ignored the very invention that could have propelled them into the future. Comfort zones are tricky because they disguise themselves as wise choices. They feel rational and protective, but over time they become cages that limit creativity, growth and possibility. The truth is that no great transformation has ever come from staying comfortable. It always requires stepping into uncertainty. Kodak's story is a powerful reminder that clinging to what feels safe might protect us in the short term, but it also risks leaving us behind when the world changes around us. Ignoring creativity and vulnerability stifles growth. Make it lengthy. Ignoring creativity and vulnerability stifles growth because progress is born from the willingness to imagine what does not yet exist and to risk failure in bringing it to life. Kodak had within its walls one of the most groundbreaking innovations of the century, yet instead of nurturing that spark they silenced it, choosing stability over possibility. True creativity requires vulnerability. It asks us to take ideas that might seem strange, risky or disruptive and trust that they could become something meaningful. By ignoring that vulnerability, Kodak shut the door on growth, not just technological growth but human growth too. They lost the chance to lead an industry because they were unwilling to embrace the uncomfortable truth that change often feels frightening before it feels rewarding. This story shows us that when we hide from creativity, when we dismiss ideas that challenge the norm, we are not protecting ourselves, we are shrinking our own future. True leadership means listening to new voices even when they disrupt the old, because the most transformative ideas often come from the edges rather than the center. In Kodak's case, the voice that introduced the digital camera came from a young engineer, someone who dared to imagine photography without film. Instead of being celebrated, his vision was treated as a threat because it challenged the foundation of Kodak's long-standing business model. But real leadership is not about silencing disruption, it is about recognizing its potential and having the humility to listen even when it unsettles what we know. The greatest leaders understand that innovation rarely arrives neatly packaged. It often comes as an uncomfortable question or a radical proposal that shakes the status quo. By ignoring those voices, Kodak missed a chance to reinvent itself and the result was decline. This reminds us that leadership is not about preserving power but about creating space for new ideas and trusting that disruption is often the beginning of growth. Kodak's fall is a reminder that courage to adapt is what sustains relevance and connection, because no matter how powerful a brand or individual may be, the world around us never stands still. Technology evolves, cultures shift, and people's needs change, and those who refuse to evolve eventually get left behind. Kodak once stood as a household name synonymous with capturing memories, but their inability to adapt showed that success is not something you achieve once and hold onto forever. It is something that must be renewed again and again through courage and willingness to change. Relevance is not about clinging to what worked yesterday, it is about being brave enough to step into tomorrow even when the path is uncertain. Connection too is sustained not by repeating the same old formulas but by showing that you are listening, evolving, and willing to meet people where they are today. Kodak's story reminds us that adaptation is not optional, it is the very thing that keeps us alive in business, in relationships, and in life. In conclusion, the story of Kodak is not simply about a company that lost its way, it is about the choices we all face when confronted with change. Kodak had the chance to shape the future, but fear of letting go kept them tied to the past. Their fall reminds us that comfort is temporary and courage is what creates lasting impact. Whether in business or in life, true growth demands vulnerability, the willingness to listen to new voices, and the bravery to adapt even when it feels risky. The digital camera Kodak once buried is now everywhere in our lives, a daily reminder that ignoring possibility doesn't stop the future from arriving, it only stops us from being part of it. The lesson is clear: relevance, connection, and legacy are sustained not by holding on but by daring to move forward.